right, good morning everyone. It is bright and early here. We are going to get our sourdough started today. And this is from the dry starter method that I've shown you before. Last night I got this leaven together. You can see it's all nice and bubbly. And when I started, it actually looked closer to this. Really dry, sticky, almost Play-Doh consistency. And then it looks all nice and bubbly like this. And it's ready to use. Now to that, we're going to do a basic sourdough bread. We're going to do about 300 grams of water. I did warm water here. And we'll give that a mix. To that, we will add our 600 grams of flour. Okay, we're at 300 here, somebody remember. Okay, so as you can see, it's starting to get pretty thick and raggy looking. That's perfectly okay. You're not gonna have a solid elastic piece of dough right now, and that's totally to be expected. Be careful when you're stirring in this flour when it gets to this point, because it will explode all over the kitchen if you're not careful. And just mix it together as much as possible, and then we're gonna let it rest. Here we are going to do our stretch and fold method, just like I've shown before. You stretch it a bit, try not to break it, and then fold it back onto itself. Stretch it to its max, and you'll see as you do it, it will become more elastic, more stuck together. And then you'll just cover it up and let it rest for another 15 minutes, and you'll do this 4 times. What I'm going to eat is the buttery dinner rolls from the King Arthur booklet that I have. I love that booklet. But here you can see it's called the leaven, right? So you take the dry sourdough that I showed you. You take this guy here, and this is what I'm starting to use for all of my sourdough recipes now, because it is not a big cauldron of sourdough. It doesn't take a lot to get anything going. Basically, think of it like this. This is what helps me. This is your culture. This is your starter. This is what you are using to inoculate your dough, to inoculate what you're creating and to get the sourdough going. So you're taking a little bit of this, you're putting it into your batter or your mixture of dough, and then that's going to feed it. And then it's going to grow and multiply in there because it's happy and it's fed and all that great stuff, right? And so that's what's gonna make your sourdough bread. And that process is what's gonna make your sourdough rise. And I'll have links to some other people that explain this way more in depth, but this is what I'm using. It looks like this. It's very, very thick. So basically what you do is you mix this up. When you have just a little bit left, you mix a new batch up and it goes back into the fridge. And then when you're ready to bake something, you pull out 30 grams of it. You mix it with some water and flour, like the recipe says, and that becomes your wet sourdough starter. And from that is what you use for your recipes that call for a conventional fed sourdough, okay? And this goes back into the fridge for the next time. So when I saw that, I thought it was a pretty amazing idea, because I have used sourdough before and I know how much of a mess it can be for the starter. And then when I found that on Elliott Homestead, I love it, and I'm probably going to stick with that from now on. But now is the prime time to start using it. So let's get some bread. Baking. All right, let's get making our first batch of dough. So we're going to do the starter first. So I'm just going to grab out some of this starter, leaving about half. So when you mix up your leaven, that creates about a cup of starter, which is what most recipes for a full loaf of bread will call for. So you can scale your leaven to suit your needs. Next to that, let's add our water first. You want to get it sort of more liquidy so that way the flour will mix in easier. So I'll go ahead and stir that in by hand. To that, let's add our egg. Let's do our tablespoon of sugar. The cooled butter, melted or soft, doesn't matter. Give that a good mix. And our 1 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now we just need to add our flour. So I find my hook does not catch everything right away until it's a harder dough. So I like to hand mix it first. 2 cups. Here you can see the different stages of the bread dough coming together. In the very beginning, it's sort of sticking all over the bowl. And then it becomes sort of stringy and ragged. And then it starts to become clumps that chase themselves around the bowl. And then it becomes a nice glob. And here it's a nice together dough, but it's not quite done, so I just let it knead in there for a little while. And while I do that, I go ahead and clean up my mess. I like to clean as I go so there's not such a big mess at the end. And then when that is done, go ahead and cover it and let it rest. I put some oil on it to keep it from sticking. Here are the different doughs I'm doing. This is the sourdough bread. That is the bun dough without yeast in it, and the bread dough with yeast in it, and we'll kind of keep an eye on those and let them rest. Okay, this drawer situation down here is driving me nuts. I had 2 boxes of parchment paper, so I'm going to consolidate them. There's that. Food storage bags. Show you guys what I'm doing. So I've got compostable forks, silverware. I take off the sides here. Never use this guy, but keep him. I'll take out the bag. I'll take out the instructions. Like these guys, but they're not very convenient in here, are they? I find it takes finally getting fed up with a system to change it up, and that was definitely the point I was reaching with this. And then the dreaded parchment paper, you'll see, it's like a saga, it won't go away. Next project is to do some bacon, and when I have large batches, I'd like to stick them in the oven, 350, let them go for half an hour or so depending on how thick they are, and they come out nice and done. And next we're checking on our dough. Our bread dough is ready. You see the difference between the yeast and no yeast. All right, I'm going to spare you most of this process as it did not turn out well. It's not a waste. I'll still use it probably to make bread crumbs or croutons with. But you can see I'm doing the stretch and fold method, getting ready to shape it, letting it rest, doing all the things. I'll show you more detail later. But this is a new recipe to me, and I forgot to put in the salt. Somehow I didn't write it down, and I didn't put it in the recipe. It happens. Even those of us who are experienced with bread, who have done many loaves that are beautiful, we all have our moments that don't work. So don't get discouraged, keep going, and you can find something else to do with that bread. So here you see I am making the meat buns again. I just take a pre-made filling that I did before and put a scoop in the middle of the buns. Fold them up. I use my finger to kind of hold them in place and then pull up the ends to create a nice seal. This mixture was a pork and onion mixture, and it was leftovers from another dinner, and I just put it in the freezer until I was ready to make these buns. And I have more left over, and so I'll be doing it again because it was definitely a hit. These are delicious. These go into a 350-degree oven for 20 minutes, and they come out beautiful. You see that delicious feeling on the inside. They were gone within a couple days. And next is our dreaded bread dough. You see it completely stuck. It was so sticky. The salt can help to create structure in the bread and firm it up a bit, and so it was very, very soft and did not turn out very well. Obviously, it was pretty bland without the salt in there. So I'll definitely try the recipe again, doing it right this time, and we'll see how it turns out. After that, I need a little bit of a break, so I went and dealt with some fabric that I had soaking to try to get out some of the dye before I use it. I'm going to make up some cloth napkins in this nice Christmassy print. And so I rinsed that out and then hung it up to dry and then ironed it. And I'll get those sewn up shortly. And here is the second batch of rolls, the ones without the sourdough. I did not let them proof crazy long because I was pretty done at this point. They would have gotten bigger if I had left them a little bit longer, but they still came out beautifully. Nice and soft on the inside, a little crunch on the outside. They're perfect. A little butter on there. Let's give them a test. Let's try it.
Thank you so much. This is like amazing.
And the very last project I get to today is making beef bone broth. I had these bones in the freezer and needed to get them out. And so I roasted them along with some mushrooms in the oven. And for about half an hour at 400, 350, 400, something like that. And then you can see me back here scraping off the bits on the pan. You want that, that's great flavor. I add everything into my Instant Pot and get all those juices off. And add in whatever scraps you have. I had some onion scraps in the freezer. Went ahead and cut up a fresh onion to stick in there. And filled it up with water. And went ahead and turned it on. I started with 20 minutes first, and then I let that sit overnight. And I went ahead and tried it out, and it was okay. It mostly tasted fatty to me, so I still have some work to do. But I had a chunk of meat in the freezer, and so I went ahead and pulled that out and threw it in there and cooked that up, and that definitely helped give it some better flavor. Now, I am not an expert in beef bone broth. Chicken, no problem, but I've never done beef before. And it turned out okay in the end. So the last step will be for me to can up that broth and get that on the shelves. And I'll sign out here and tell you all thank you so much for your love and support. I truly appreciate it. It means the world to me. And until next time, we'll see you later. Bye. Say bye, Leonard.